We've talked about it. We're trying to do some season preview stuff and talk about high school matchups to watch, but this recruiting news just keeps on hitting, particularly in a big way, seemingly every week for the LSU Tigers, who get a couple of new commitments over the course of the weekend. There's a couple of other names to watch this week. This is Louisiana versus All Y'all's Recruit That Boot with Jarrett Roser and Sam Pampers Commercial Spiegelman, a man after Joe Sloan's own heart. What's up, Samuel? How we doing?
Yeah, I thought that was going to show up during our introductory music. I'm doing great, and I've been home for almost 3 days, and that'll be it before I hit the road again. But you know, 'tis the season, like we were saying off air. It's football season, so you can't complain too much. And yeah, it's hard to keep up with all these commitments that just keep. It's August. It's like the senior seasons are here, but you know, recruiting never stops, Jarrett.
Yeah, no doubt. And that's why you're all over the country in the middle of August right now, just getting back from Georgia. You'll be up in the Carolinas this weekend. You'll be out here, Louisiana, to start Louisiana's high school season next week. So as hectic as the Tigers recruiting trail has been, it's already getting pretty hectic for you in mid-August. So, you know, nobody knows better than you. And I'll go ahead and work that pass the phone to Joe Sloan clip in here somewhere, because it's just phenomenal work by Garrett Nussmeier.
It's Garrett Nussmeier again. I'm passing the phone to somebody who could be on a Pampers commercial.
Hi, I'm Coach Sloan. This is Chris. He's the friendliest guy I've ever met.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, you know, to be a fly on the wall in that quarterback room with Pretty Ricky over there too. I mean, it's a unique group of individuals and some really talented quarterbacks as well, and also Joe.
I mean, you mentioned how quickly things are unfolding. When we talked last, whatever it was, Monday or Tuesday, I hadn't realized yet that Cade Phillips flip season was moving as quickly as it did. And so this weekend, the Tigers, you know, credit to Coach Corey Raymond and company, flip a guy who committed to Texas this summer. I mean, just over a month ago, who literally, when he committed to Texas, he was the spark of us having that conversation about seeing some LSU fans on Twitter getting a little bit critical of Corey Raymond. And now all of a sudden you look and he becomes the second of two of the nation's top cornerbacks committed, along with a couple of fantastic safeties and in the mix for a couple of other guys we're going to be talking about here shortly. But man, Cade Phillips, the pride of Hightower High, shout out Amos and Benji Morale. How big was this for Corey and the Tigers to flip this commitment for a guy that, I mean, is one of the top prospects in the country, certainly in his position?
Well, first off, the last time I was at Hightower High School, your boy Amos was blowing up my phone, so excited, thinking I was visiting because it was his alma mater. Everyone knows I was there for Latrell Neville, and that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. But no, this is a huge flip for LSU, getting Cade Phillips away from Texas. He's a Houston kid. But this is what we talked about, Jarrett. LSU made its push for its cornerbacks last month. They ended up on the right side with 5-star DJ Pickett, ended up on the wrong side with 4-star cornerback Jabari Antoine, who's committed to Miami. And that's basically what the LSU staff said, on to the next one. And that includes some of the top targets on their board, like Cade, that had already committed to Texas. But fear not, Corey Raymond is always on the case. He is, you know, he has an easy thing to sell. There's a lot of room for early playing time in Baton Rouge at that position. And he's looking for reinforcements. And, you know, it shouldn't surprise anyone at this point that Corey Raymond's got a few tricks up his sleeves with some of the best DBs, and, you know, in Louisiana. And of course, he has pretty good stock in Florida, Mississippi, and Texas along the way too.
We've got a bunch of prospects to get to in terms of the commitments from the weekend and the commitments to come. So this isn't the last. We'll talk about LSU's secondary, but just kind of keeping moving along. Probably not a lot new to add in terms of the other commitment over the weekend. We talked about him last week, kind of previewing the decision, but the big tight end from South Carolina, Mike Tyler, becomes the Tigers' second tight end as they continue to add to a position that is as strong as any on the roster already, with a lot of great young talent already in Baton Rouge. I mean, have been three of 3 tight ends have been among the top standouts in camp all August. And so now you add a couple of more to that 2025 class, but just a big weekend overall for LSU between Phillips and then, I mean, it's not complete until signing day, but landing the commitment of a Mike Tyler.
Yeah, we touched on it last week, but JD LaFleur has been their early commitment for well over a year. He's obviously a legacy at LSU and NFL bloodlines. He's your ex tight end, and then you look at someone like Mike Tyler, who's 6'4" and 200 plus pounds. He's a big bodied receiver that in LSU's weight room program and strength and conditioning is going to add a ton of mass and probably follow a similar trajectory as a Trades Green or a Kamorian Pimpton as this big-bodied receiver. It may not be a traditional inline tight end, but the way that Cortez Hankton and Joe Sloan work this offense, they have different bodied receivers at different spots. They use them in the slot. They can use them as a traditional tight end. They can be multiple, and that gives the LSU offense just a lot of different razors to cut you down the road.
Looking forward to this Saturday. We've got a couple of DB targets on the schedule, including a home state guy and Aiden Anding, the fantastic cornerback that we've talked about in a variety of capacities throughout the last several months, a guy that we both really like from that reigning state champion and state champion hopeful again, Rustin Bearcats defense. He's got a top 3 of LSU, Texas, and Arkansas. And so let's start with him. What's kind of the latest that you're hearing about Aiden, a guy who I thought I looked at as a likely future Tiger way before they even made the move and offered him. And I think that feels like maybe where he's still trending, but it's been, at least on my end, kind of quiet, which always makes me nervous. But what are you kind of hearing about Aiden right now?
I'm Ron Burgundy. Yeah, well, we talked about what his summer was like, obviously making OVs to Miami, Arkansas, and Texas. And at the tail end of June, it seemed like Anding was leaning toward picking the Longhorns before Frank Wilson and Corey Raymond put the offer on the table. Since then, he's been to Baton Rouge with his family, getting, as good of an unofficial to the Bayou Splash as you can get, as close to an official visit as they can make it. And right now, I still, I like where LSU is sitting. I do think the silence around Anding is a little bit perplexing. Texas was very much high on Aiden Anding. Terry Joseph loves what he saw out of the Rustin cornerback, and Texas just loses a cornerback to LSU. So you imagine that they're trying to pump the brakes and try to make a late run at Anding, but I still like where LSU is sitting. It's a couple more days till the end of the week, but my prediction is on the Tigers with one of the best in the boot.
That's, if I have to put money somewhere, that's where my money is. But if I don't hear back from a guy this close to commitment and you don't have a great sense of, this is already a move that's being made to LSU, and you think about the foundation that was laid, as you mentioned, throughout the summer and even before that with Texas, some of the relationship with James Simon and his family and stuff like that, there's enough concern for me that I don't feel overly easy about it heading into the back half of this week, but I am optimistic, I guess.
Yeah, I think if there's one team to watch, it's definitely Texas. Again, had been leaning Texas at midway through the summer. I think if not for that LSU offer, might already be committed to the Longhorns. And obviously Terry Joseph didn't go into hibernation for the summer. He's out recruiting. And he's not going to try to let LSU take away one of his top cornerbacks on his board for 2025.
A guy in Texas that we talked about a few weeks ago when he first set this August 24th commitment date, Jonah Williams, the fantastic multi-sport standout and really intriguing on the football side, likely safety prospect. But a guy who's a very versatile and talented athlete, and seemingly anything he does, he had announced his top 5 with LSU, Texas A&M, Texas. I can already tell I'm about to forget one. Oregon, and who's the one I'm leaving out with him?
Oh, your guess is as good as mine.
Yeah, I think those have been the main players for him, though. Essentially, Texas A&M, LSU, and Oregon. And apologies to whoever the 5th one was that is escaping me at the moment.
Check your DMs, Roser.
What's been the latest on Jonah Williams and just intel coming your way out there, in the Lone Star State and the way that he's trending?
Yeah, I think the longer this recruitment has played out, the more and more tea leaves there are that Jonah's going to end up staying pretty close to home, whether that's in Baton Rouge, whether that's in College Station, possibly even Austin. He's a multi-sport star. We obviously know that those programs in particular have also excellent baseball programs. But Jonah is someone who has been leaning a lot of different ways, been pulled in a lot of different ways throughout his recruitment. There was one time where Ohio State had buzz. There was one point where Oregon had a lot of buzz. There was one point where Oklahoma was trending up with Jonah Williams. As it comes down the stretch, I think LSU is still in the mix very much. But you see that the Texas and A&M, I think, are still very much in there. I don't think any of these schools have a good pulse on what Jonah's going to do at this moment. Which with the 5 stars, it tends to come down to the final, 36, 24 hours where you start to really say, I got a good sense. But I wouldn't sleep on the in-state schools just yet.
His 5th school in that top 5 was USC also, which I
of course,
I don't expect him to go to USC, but they're in the 5. Another prospect to watch who, you can tell me if this has been updated. I don't know that we have an actual set commitment date on Walter Mathis, a fantastic defensive lineman from out there in Georgia, where you were just visiting this past week, but someone that I know the LSU Tigers have been really high on throughout this offseason. And he is someone that my understanding is he had hoped to kind of be in this sort of timeline and getting a commitment made before the season started. And so that timeline is fast shrinking right now at the moment. So have you heard anything of, yeah, we're running out of days, Walter. Are you hearing any kind of latest intel on him, whether that be just, hey, here's a day or here's a weekend or whatever it may be to keep an eye out, or has it been pretty quiet and he's going to surprise some people one way or another?
Yeah, I think it'll, maybe sometime this month would be fair to say, but I don't have an exact date. I do know that LSU feels good about where they're positioned with Mathis, as we've talked about on this show at length. The defensive line, especially on the interior, they are trying to pad their depth. They are trying to upgrade their talent. This year, obviously, with Jacobian, he's a super senior over there. He's been there for some time, and they're trying to supplement the depth. And they've went into Texas for a couple of big bodies like Zion Williams and Dylan Battle. And they're hoping to add a little bit more depth. And they're going to the Peach State, where they've been very successful this cycle, given not only Bo Davis's ties to that part of the country, but also Blake Baker.
This defensive haul for LSU's 2025 class, particularly if you look at if they add 2 or 3 of these guys that we just mentioned that are still on the the near horizon for some commitments, the group is just getting absolutely filthy. When you look at 6 weeks ago where we're telling people, hey, be patient, Corey Raymond's working, we swear. And now a secondary is coming together with the 4 names that are already on board and the potential of 1 or 2 of these other names we just mentioned. How impressed have you been with just the close of this summer by that LSU staff to get a lot of these guys from all over the country, highly ranked, really talented guys on board before their senior years?
In years past, I used to always joke with team sites and team publishers that, in June, they would be complaining that LSU had 4 and 5 commitments and Alabama had 4 and they were the ranked 23rd or 36th in the country. But we've seen always in years past, like the summertime has been the heat wave, for a lack of better terms, for LSU and a lot of other major blue blood programs out there. But now with not only is it camp season and a chance for a lot of these coaches to do their in-person evaluations, but it's also big for official visits. And that includes June and it stretches into July. And of course, August is red hot as a lot of kids are getting ready to play their senior seasons. And at this point, I think it's fair to say more than 80% of the country's best players, if not more, are either committed or about to commit within the next week. That number is going to only shoot up. So I think for this staff to close as strongly as they have, obviously they've missed on a couple of targets along the way, a lot of the guys that we've mentioned the past couple of weeks, but you see that they're very quick to move on to their second and third targets. They're putting together a fantastic high school haul, which, today's modern day recruiting is a lot of emphasis on the transfer portal and play now guys. But you see BK and this staff also looking toward their future. Some of these guys can play sooner than others, and others might need 2 or 3 years in the program of, again, putting on weight, learning their position, finding a fit in whatever scheme, whatever role they're going to play. But that's how good college football teams win championships, is when you have the superstars and then the depth behind them. And I think that's what LSU is building in this particular class, which is ranked inside the top 10 and only getting stronger as the days go on with every commitment along the way.
BK's been extremely vocal about that look, we came into a situation as a staff that we had to rebuild that roster on the fly a little bit. And so they had to focus early on the transfer portal, but that ultimately they wanted to get back to a point to where the bulk of each class was going to be top high school prospects. And it looks like that process, that transition has continued to take another step forward with what has shaped up to be a great 2025 high school recruiting class. And I know some people look at the landscape of college football and say it is the transfer portal era and you can't win that way, and it get kind of critical. But I think they're doing a heck of a job of building something that they feel like is done a little bit more sustainably.
Yeah, I mean, you just think about a lot of the new coaches that are on that staff, or really familiar faces that are back on that staff, and Blake Baker trying to find linebackers and front seven players that fit his scheme and fit his front. Bo Davis trying to find the right defensive lineman that he wants to build that stable around. And for Corey Raymond's, who we know is a stickler for certain traits in cornerbacks, in his safeties. That's not the way that LSU has been recruiting. They've gotten some fantastic players over the past couple of years, but they don't really fit the Corey Raymond mold. So, for fans that are, anxious, this is what you want to see. You want Corey Raymond putting guys that he's evaluated, and he's the best in the country at it, evaluating DBs or projecting guys that can play in the secondary. And I'm anxious to see what we're talking about in this defensive back room in about a year from now, after a lot of these guys are on campus.
We kind of grouped all the LSU stuff together to start the show, but we have one of Louisiana's top prospects scheduled for a Friday announcement, midday Friday. Nate Sheppard will make his decision public between a top 5 of, and let's hope I get them all this time, Tulane, Duke, Cincinnati, Northwestern, and Cal. Nailed it, 5 for 5. We talked a little bit about Nate, the fantastic Mandeville running back, so productive last year and helped carry that team or lead that team on a deep playoff run. We talked a little bit about him last week and how some things were shaping up and how much we've enjoyed covering him to this point, just everything he brings to the table as a player and young man. I know you've had a chance to connect with him a little bit more as we get closer and closer toward commitment day. What's your latest on what to expect from Nate Sheppard on Friday about noon or a little bit after?
Yeah, the latest, I don't think it's a full 5-team race. I think it's coming down to Cal and Duke, and I think that Tulane is still involved here to a degree. But I can tell after his official visits in June, it felt like Duke and really Cal kind of set the pace in his recruitment. We talked about Northwestern offering, and that was a school that he had built a really strong connection to. But as the summer has gone on, it just feels like those two have continued to chip away at Nate the Great. As you it can attest to, one of the best 3-down running backs in the state of Louisiana for this 2025 cycle. And when you think about guys that have come through those particular programs, Cal with their all-purpose backs, and Duke in the same regard, he kind of fits that mold. And we know that Will was like this, and Nate is just like his older brother, a very smart kid, and is putting academics first. So I think that's why Tulane is still kicking its shot, because obviously an excellent university uptown, but right now, my focus is on Duke and Cal toward Friday.
Trying to see if I can make it out there for that one and be there for when Nate announces. Again, one of the top players in Louisiana, set for a Friday early afternoon decision with some great options spanning from coast to coast. We do have time for a topic that I was hoping we'd get a chance to get to. We did a nice job of hitting through a lot of that news. And as this college football season approaches, we're seeing one quarterback battle after another decided with some announcements. I mean, here locally, that Tulane program has yet to make an announcement, and Coach Summerall was very clear with us after the scrimmage last Thursday. He doesn't really feel like he has to make an announcement. He doesn't need to put that out there in the media. He just needs to figure out as a team who they'll have take the first snaps in the opener against Southeastern. But Ty Thompson, the highly decorated former recruit that transferred from Oregon, was the third quarterback to take snaps in that scrimmage, a guy that I think a lot of us thought would be the likely starter for that team this year. And we've seen some other situations play out like that where Malachi Nelson was announced he's not going to be the Boise State starter after transferring in heading into this season. And Jaden Mayava as well at USC. Instead, the Trojans against LSU will start Miller Moss, the guy that's been on that roster and waded through other transfer portal quarterbacks the past few years. What do you make of, we're not going to overstate it as a nationwide trend that all these portal guys are not taking over the jobs that they transfer to go try and win, but seeing a couple of those fall into place that way for guys that were, 4 and 5 star guys coming out of high school. What's your kind of reaction or thought to that of just seeing some of the guys that are already on that roster being able to hold those guys off?
Yeah, sorry, I had to mute someone on my phone. When evaluating quarterbacks, and it's something that I think is extremely difficult, and I talk to you about this all the time. So, sorry that you have to hear it one more time, but it's something that is extremely daunting, and that you need to see the progression over several years. If you're trying to fully evaluate a quarterback, you want to see the baseline up until their senior year of high school. And from the quarterbacks you've seen, are they traitsy guys? Are they projection guys? Are they super productive high school guys? And the biggest thing is there's always traits, and there's always commonalities that you're looking for. Some things like accuracy, being able to read and react to the field, what defenses are throwing at you, ball placement, anticipation, obviously arm strength and all that, and the feel for the position within the pocket. Can you extend plays? So many X factors. Sometimes it just doesn't click in the expected amount of time. So I think especially 4 and 5 star guys, as someone who's in that shoe of trying to evaluate those guys, you want to say that those are the guys that you're counting on that will get a good grasp on offenses when they get there on Saturdays into those quarterback rooms, and they will have a good grasp on their offense. But sometimes it does take a little bit longer than others. It's the hardest position in all of sports. And sometimes you can have the strongest arm and when you're just playing on air, you can put it anywhere on the field. But when there's a pass rush, it's a different feeling. And when you have some of the best defensive minds in the country plotting to confuse you, it's confusing. So I think there's a whole group of factors that all play into it. So in a way, it's a little bit surprising because you bet on traits, but I covered Malachi Nelson, and I've seen some of the things. When you see a live evaluation, you see the good things, you see the bad things, and I've seen enough of the latter where I'm not surprised that he left USC, and I'm not surprised that he didn't win the Boise State starting quarterback job. Am I a little bit more surprised after seeing Ty Thompson in a couple times in the past? Sure, but I don't see nearly as much as what Coach Summerall does. So to me, the best thing with evaluating quarterbacks is doing so as much and as frequently as possible, getting the full picture. So there's always a story that maybe hasn't been put out, and it doesn't surprise me too much to see guys who have waited and maybe have just a better feel for a very hard position take the reins in some of those quarterback competitions.
You hit on it some in there, but I was going to ask you as just a follow-up, the complications of trying to evaluate the most cerebral position in the sport when you're trying to evaluate based on, okay, here's the huddle film of a play from this game and then a play from that game and whatnot, or some of the camp stuff where it's a piece of it and you see those traits that you mentioned, but you don't necessarily get the full picture from the handle on the game and the leadership attributes all the time. You only see kind of shades of it here and there. And then with 7-on-7 stuff, similar sort of thing, they might get thrown out there where they're playing that weekend with or against guys that have never played together or ever will play together again and stuff like that. Just how complicated is that to try to get an accurate read on that position in particular under those circumstances where you just get these limited glimpses?
Yeah, and I definitely know people in this field that definitely, can go back and forth. After one game, you might see something great, and then 1 7-on-7, you're like, what was I thinking? This guy's, a bust. But I think you have to take the context into consideration. 7-on-7, who are they throwing to? Are they throwing to like the best receivers in the country, or are you Trevor Lawrence that played with a bunch of guys that didn't really make it nearly as far as he did, and willed his team to state championships? And we talked about this with guys like Arch, where you're at a 2A program in Louisiana, but look at the heights that they reached and the numbers that they produced with this quarterback behind center, and look at all they accomplished, things that had never been before done uptown at Newman. And I think those are some traits that certainly carry over. You could speak about Quinn Ewers leading his team to a state championship, but also showing those traits in that offense. He made high level throws, and he showed the traits. So it's just there's so many factors that play into it, but fully, in my opinion, I don't think you can stamp one of these guys as a 5-star, which I think would check every single box, right? You don't say a 5-star, but you say a 5-star quarterback, without doing at least multiple in-person evaluations. And each one, you have to take the full context, look at all the pieces of, I always call recruiting, kind of putting together like a detective case. And I think an evaluation is a little bit similar in gathering all your materials, looking everything as a full body of work, and then making your declaration. But it hits for everyone at a different point, and sometimes it never does. Sometimes it's all traits, and it all has to be up here too. And this is the most important part, that mental part.
Well, we certainly appreciate that additional context from your perspective. I'm glad we got a chance to get to it, because people consistently kind of want to get a little bit more of a peek behind the scenes of some of the evaluation process and stuff, beyond just the recruiting news, but the evaluation piece, and that quarterback position is obviously one that always has a spotlight on the players, as well as the evaluations and news reporting and all of those things, around the players. And it's been, again, I'm not going to call it a major trend, but it's been an interesting little series of dominoes to see in the span of a couple of days all play out that way. Samuel, appreciate you as always, man.
Happy to be here, Jay.
There you go. Looking forward to seeing Sam back in Louisiana here shortly, about a week and a half or 2 weeks from now, as we kick off this high school football season in Louisiana. Hopefully between now and then we get a chance to talk a little bit more big picture preview of this high school football season from a recruiting standpoint, and some games we're looking forward to, including one that we might be seeing right off the bat in week 1. Thanks as always to everyone for tuning in and watching. Thanks to Sam for stopping by and chatting and doing his thing in between all of his hectic travels. He's Sam Spiegelman. I'm Jared Roser. This is Louisiana versus all y'all's Recruit That Boot. Have a great one.
Now I'm passing the phone to somebody who could be on a Pampers commercial.
Hi, I'm Coach Sloan.